and the people of Liberia as you are fighting the pandemic, and mourn the losses of those that have lost their lives to this pandemic. We certainly hope that this meeting will be a meeting where we can discuss how the Peacebuilding Commission can support you in this difficult situation. Can I also warmly welcome my good friend and colleague, Ambassador D. Maxwell Kemaya, the permanent representative of Liberia to the United Nations here in New York. We have very good cooperation, and I'm looking forward to continue that cooperation, good cooperation with him and his mission. Before starting the meeting and giving the floor to our briefers, I'd just like to acknowledge and welcome the meeting that was held with the Peacebuilding Commission and the COVID response last week, called by my colleague, good friend, Marc-André Blanchard from Canada. I think that this meeting really showed how important the work of the Peacebuilding Commission is in this time, and more needed actually than ever, especially with the countries that we have on the Peacebuilding Commission's agenda, often are fragile countries where the support is more needed than ever. As you might have known, I had the intention to call a meeting of the PBC configuration already in mid-March, but for obvious reasons that meeting had to be postponed. So the intention and the objective of this meeting is, of course, to focus on the socioeconomic situation in Liberia in light of the current COVID-19 pandemic. And we will receive an update from the government, from the United Nations, from the World Bank on their ongoing response. I hope that we today, in the discussions after the briefings, can focus on the specific impact of the pandemic, what it has on the peacebuilding efforts in Liberia, as well as what kind of international support is needed to mitigate the impact in the country. And before I give the floor to our briefers, I have a few notes on a technical aspect of these virtual meetings, and I hope that it will work. Once our last briefer has finished their remarks, a speakers list will be open in the Zoom chat room, which can be found either on the top right of your Zoom screen or at the bottom of the screen, depending on the devices that you are using. Once I open the floor for member states interventions, please write your name, country, and your title in that chat room. And I will also appeal to you to make this meeting as efficient as possible, that you will keep to the time limits, 5 minutes for briefers and 3 minutes for member states. With those introductory remarks, I will now hand over the floor to our distinguished briefers, and I will first call on the Honorable Minister of Finance and Development Planning, Mr. Samuel Tvea. Mr. Tvea, Finance Minister, you have the floor. Do we have the Excellency, the Finance Minister, online? I don't know if we can get in touch with Monrovia in case there is a technical problem for us to hear the Finance Minister. Of course, we also have the Minister of Internal Affairs, His Excellency Barney Sirleaf. If he is available, maybe we can start with him. But I need to get in touch with the Monrovia to understand what the problems are.
Maybe there must be some problem.
Do we have the Minister of Internal Affairs, His Excellency Mrs. Sirleaf, online, who could maybe take the floor first?
I'm trying to see if I can reach them.
Okay. Thank you.
Trying to see if we can get them. Maybe they have some technical problem. So we're trying to connect, trying to get them on. I don't know if Madam Doe is on.
Unmute the minister, Anna, please. Minister Sirleaf is on mute, but he talks, but we can't hear him.
Can we unmute the microphone for the Internal Minister, Mrs. Sirleaf?
Let me call him. They say he's talking now. He's here because his phone is mute.
I can see the RC right here in Monrovia, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
We hear you, Minister. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity once more. The Peacebuilding Commission in New York, we are very pleased to be on this platform. Distinguished ambassadors, my colleagues, cabinet ministers here in Monrovia, our great RC who is coordinating all of these activities here in Monrovia, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. The outbreak of the COVID-19 in March 2020 in Liberia has significantly affected the social, economic, and political dynamics of the country and will potentially reverse the peace-building gains made over the years if COVID-19 is not contained as quickly as possible. Liberia's fragility has been further exacerbated, impacting the already ailing economy and exposing our acutely weak healthcare system once more to tremendous shocks, thereby leaving the citizens extremely vulnerable, especially the aged people living with disabilities, as well as women and children and youth. Our government has taken potential steps in providing, are we there?
Yes, sure, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Our government has taken potential steps in providing, preventing and the escalation of the virus, thereby coming up with the system, the incident management system has been set up, and the government is making frontal efforts in internal affairs. As this started in April the 2nd, to be precise, a roundtable discussion was held with partners here in Monrovia, led by my Peacebuilding Office, where the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, was represented. The Swedish government was represented through the embassy of Ireland, and also some civil society organizations, so as to discuss the impact that this coronavirus will have at the end of fighting the pandemic. The roundtable discussion looked at how conflict sensitivities, COVID-19,
We seem to have lost, at least I cannot hear the minister. We seem to have lost connection with Monrovia.
Oh, no, I'm still here.
Okay, okay.
Okay, are we there?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, councils learning, drawing from lesson learned from the Ebola crisis, informed by the outcome of the roundtable discussions, coupled with the socio-economic and political situation of our country, we would like to advance the following peace-building priorities for consideration. One, to support and strengthen our healthcare delivery system in our country, to promote national reconciliation, which will also heavily be focused on boundary harmonization among the counties, between districts, support the resuscitation of our national economy, which is very key because of this impact that of this coronavirus. Most of our small businesses are facing the impact now. While the government is making frantic effort to keep the country safe and peaceful, it is requiring support from national and international partners, including the private sector, the UN, civil society organization, to assist mitigate the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on peace-building gains and maintain collaborative peace and development efforts. We call on our partners to support the healthcare sector by initially strengthening the healthcare system through procurement of some medical supply, PPEs, logistical support in support of the fight against COVID-19. Further support to national reconciliation is very paramount in a week of challenges being posed by the COVID-19 related to the mutual lifestyle of mutual style of life. In addition to human rights, structural violation, and gender-based violence, to support strengthening the effort towards decentralized community based on peace-building, conflict prevention, early warning, early response, and social cohesion. Human rights are essential area needing intervention through the integrated, coordinated approach in order to maintain sustainable peace and development. Finally, support to help develop a robust conflict sensitivity response strategy will help us to address the multiple and complex issues presented by the pandemic COVID-19. These will include addressing weak healthcare delivery systems, governance, trust, human rights, gender issues, weak coordination, communication, weak social mobilization efforts, as well as psychosocial contact tracing and information gaps. Of course, their body management happens to be very key in this regards. So on that note, I submit back to New York. This is things that I think if we look into during the COVID-19 fight, the fragility we have in terms of keeping the peace we have, will also help our country in a greater way. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think it is. Thank you also for being so specific on your priorities. I understand now that we have the Minister of Finance and Development Planning, His Excellency Samuel Twea, online. So I will now give the Minister the floor.
Hello, you can hear me? Hello, hello?
Yes, Minister, we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, just want to make sure. Yeah, I have a small technical issue there. It's been resolved. So it's great to join the meeting. I remember participating in two of these meetings previously over the last 2 years. It's great to see the work that the Peacebuilding Commission does for Liberia and all of our ambassadors, and the support on behalf of the President of the government. Say a big thank you to all of the support that you have provided through this office, and I'm sure that you're willing to even do more in these critical times. As with many countries, Liberia is in a very difficult situation right now, coming off the history of Ebola, where more than 4,000 people died in this country, and our economy was collapsed. After Ebola, I think the economy was in a negative rate for some time, and we still have not fully recovered from the impact of Ebola. So some of the recovery that the slow recovery has been part of the drag that Ebola occasioned on our economy. And then we're now buffeted by COVID-19, coming out of macroeconomic recovery. So it's a very serious situation. The president has responded quite well. The government began taking measures as early as February. Liberia was one of the few countries that began quarantining arrivals from highly infected countries to ensure that we don't get to that Ebola situation. So our preparedness was pretty much advanced until we got our first case. So the government provided some resources, mobilized support from international partners. Thanks to all of the ambassadors in the country from Europe and America, and thanks to all of our multilateral, bilateral partners, they've rallied around the government even at the preparedness stage. But when we got our first case, it was quite necessary to move to a different level. The president has set up a national response coordinator, different structures at the executive level. We have an incident management system that was built since Ebola through the Ministry of Health and MPhil, who've been leading the charge. I don't know the official tallies today, but I think the last one was at 59 persons, and there are hundreds of people that are being contact traced, that have been placed in personal observation centers. So the situation is evolving gradually. Yesterday, the president declared on April 8th a state of emergency, and he officially submitted a whole program to the national legislature, which is under debate currently. The main lines of all of this is that our response is moving, but we're at a point where unless we go into a lockdown situation for some time, as with many countries, we probably will not understand the full extent of infection in Liberia, because the movement of people means that they're missing links. So we will not be able to certify the accuracy of the data unless the health authorities have an opportunity to move in after a lockdown situation where they can say, this is where Liberia is, and this is the path going forward. That was the logic behind the president's state of the emergency declaration, and we're working to ensure that that happens. So as part of the president's package, one of the key strategies in the national response plan to get to all households, to get to all in affected areas or affected persons, is to be able to provide some economic support for households, particularly the vulnerable households. So it's quite difficult in Africa to achieve a lockdown because there are no visible ways of reaching the vulnerable. Governments don't have the means to do so over a protracted period of time. So this is the quandary that African countries have been in. So what we've done is the president has said that working with our international partners, we're going to provide food for our people for over a period of 6 months, 60 days. And with that package, we believe that the lockdown situation will be a little better than what it is now. And so we're working with the World Food Program, with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to be able to design this package. And I think it's coming online quite well. So it's clear that once we get into a lockdown situation, the health authorities will be in a better situation to move this. We thank all of our development partners who provided support.
Seems like we lost the sound of the minister. Minister, are you with us? Minister Claire?
Yeah, you can
yes,
hear me?
we hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, we can hear. Okay, good. It's just some fluctuation. So I was saying that thanks to all of the partners who are contributing. The World Bank is providing 17 million, and we're doing procurement under that 17 million. There's a whole procurement list that has been developed with our partners and to bring in supplies, medical equipment, ventilators, masks, and all of that under that. We're working, the European Union is also accelerating disbursement of 15 million to the government, budget support. We're working with the African Development Bank to package support. We work with the International Monetary Fund. We've already received a debt waiver for 6 months. We're among the countries that received that. That could provide some money to support our social programs. We're working on our request to the IMF on the Rapid Credit Facility, which is a larger budget support amount that will provide resources to deal.
Minister, we can. Oh, okay, you're coming back. We couldn't hear you for a couple of minutes. Are you back?
I'm here. You
okay,
can hear
good.
me now?
Good. Yeah, continue. Please continue.
Yeah. So we're getting that. So we're thanking all of our partners. I was thanking all of our partners for the support. USAID and the US government are realigning some $40 million of support, working with the Swedish ambassador to get support from the government of Sweden. And so there's a lot of mobilization going on here. The government this government is challenged from a resource standpoint, but also from a healthcare delivery standpoint. If the number of cases continue to grow, this could seriously overwhelm our capacity to deal with this challenge, and it could really, really wreck our economy. So it's very important that we keep the focus on the fight. We get all of the support that we can get. We stay ahead of the curve. With 59, 60, 65 cases, the next level is to move to, start moving to 100 cases, and the ramifications to all of that can be dire. So I think it's a time for, as the president said in his letter, and all of government, all of society, all of partnership support around this. And we've been quite fortunate to have very good ambassadors, very good development partners who rally to our support, including partners through the Peacebuilding framework. And good to hear some responses from ambassadors around the world and see how they can help the country. I'll pause for now and hear other comments from colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and very indeed very important and useful information on the socioeconomic situation in Liberia in these challenging times. And this is, of course, the focus right now for the Liberia configuration. I'm very glad to hear that there is a good cooperation between the government, donors, the UN system, and the banks in Monrovia. That's important. And of course, we welcome the IMF's debt waiver the news that we saw last night. So thank you very much, Minister, for that. I will now call on Her Excellency, the National Coordinator for the COVID response, Her Excellency Mary Braw, to take the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Honorable Ministers, Your Excellency, Ambassadors, the resident coordinator, representatives of the World Bank, the African Development Bank, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for your continued interest in the welfare of our nation and your support for all the resources you are making available. I was appointed on April 7th. Can you hear me? Yeah. I was appointed on April 7th by His Excellency President George Weah to lead as the national coordinator for our country's COVID-19 response. However, my day job is the Director General of the General Services Agency. I see this as a national call, and with your support, we will rise to the occasion. My job is to ensure a coordinated national response. This indeed is a health crisis and a pandemic, which undoubtedly has far-reaching socioeconomic, developmental, political, and peace and security implications. It is in this regard that our response as a nation is multifarious and multi-pronged. We are responding vigorously to this pandemic. What is our methodology? Drawing from our Ebola experience, in which I served the previous government in a similar position as a coordinator, we have arranged ourselves into several pillars, health and non-health, with senior level up to ministerial leadership of these pillars, working in close coordination with the United Nations, the World Bank, bilateral partners, and our various developmental partners. Immediately we were appointed, we re-established a functioning call center to receive calls from those who may know those infected, and also to inform on the preventive measures. We have begun coordination activities, harmonizing our activities, prioritizing and rationalizing requirements in order to make maximum use of existing domestic and donor-funded resources, so as to eliminate any wastage and maintain due diligence and accountability of donor resources. Our aim is that we will offer services within all the aforementioned pillars to our people in order to trace those already affected, isolate and treat, and also prevent further community spread. In that regard, so far, we have detected 69 cases, 4 recovered, and unfortunately, 6 deaths. We are now moving into the community where we have tracers and community mobilizers working directly with the communities to identify cases, encourage those already infected to come forward and propagate preventive messages. Now, meanwhile, the government is playing a role as well. The president, in laying the state of emergency before the legislature, has proposed several measures, which the honorable ministers present here will talk to. These measures will go a long way in assisting to mitigate the challenges of the state of emergency with regards to the livelihoods of our people. I wish to once again thank the United Nations Peacebuilding Commission, the UN Resident Coordinator, the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, and all our bilateral partners for their continued support to us. And we say, we shall not disappoint you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Bro. This is very, very informative and useful indeed. And let me repeat what I said, that you might not have joined the meeting, that we stand, of course, in solidarity with the government and the people of Liberia in this difficult situation. And this meeting is really very much in the line what you have just told us, to try to support together with others. And I'm very glad again that the coordination is working and the cooperation is working on the ground in Monrovia, but very much to look into how we from the Peacebuilding Commission can support Liberia in this difficult situation, both when it comes, of course, you're handling now an acute situation, but as we have heard from your colleagues, there is also a socioeconomic situation that will affect the country for some time to come, and this is very much what we are going to discuss. So thank you so much for your intervention, and I wish you all the best in your very important work. And I will now, without further ado, call on the resident coordinator's office and give the floor to Dr. Kinsley Manning, resident coordinator in Liberia. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies and honorable ministers. The last time I talked to this commission, it was here, they were on a mission here. And we presented all the difficulties and our worries to them and solicited their support in galvanizing international resources and understanding for the country to get out of its problems. You may recall that was in November, and we're a bit worried about how we're going to finish the year and begin the next year, 2020. Your efforts have been mostly appreciated, vastly, I should say, appreciated by the government and us. And it was captured in the President's State of the Nation address in January 2020, full of optimism, which we all joined in. I'm very happy that the economy was being put on the right footing, that international community support that he requested for had been obtained, that international community's technical support and interest in how resources are managed were in place. And therefore, we're looking forward to a very bright 2020, which for him was centered on first, the consolidation of peace, which he was very proud of that he's managed to do for the past 2 years. And then 2, making sure that governance improved, and which he was very happily declaring to us that he had no political prisoners. And 3, that he had the entire country behind him to make sure that peace was consolidated, and was looking forward to a period when a lot of investment would come because the conditions would be, foreign investment would come because conditions would be propitious, and that the government had embarked on infrastructure development and was hoping to work with us and all partners, using a community-based approach to enter into the various communities, address vulnerabilities, open up opportunities for those who are poor, in line with his pro-poor prosperity, pro-poor agenda for prosperity and development. So we're all looking forward to a bright day. Then, of course, the virus crisis came. And I've had a lot of discussions with the authorities and with the president on this issue. There has been a general understanding, 3 of which I should mention, that the virus, our knowledge, international knowledge about the virus is limited. 2, that we know that countries who took the right decisions, had firm leadership and did the right thing, were able to ride the storm better than those who did the opposite. And therefore, it was important for us to adapt our programs as and when more knowledge emerged about the virus, and particularly try to get the government to provide strong leadership and the community to buy in. Something which was very good for us because we thought by getting the community behind, that will help us build structures in the fight against the virus. That will help us build structures upon which we could build for the implementation of the pro-poor agenda and the achievement of the SDG goal. So although we're very sad to see that the preventive measures that we're taking in the health sector, however efficient it was at the beginning, did not prevent the virus from getting to the community. So at the moment, I think we're going to be dealing with containing the contagion of the virus in the community. Madam Marie-Broad just told you how much we are working together to ensure that we build all the structures that is just mentioned in the form of pillars to be able to work within the community, galvanize the community for it to respond to the health challenges, and at the same time address all threats to the resilience of the community, and also use that period to help build some of the structures necessary for the community development. In the sense, there is a cloud that will probably dampen a bit of the optimism in the early months of this year. But you can see a silver lining, that is, they can take advantage of this, organize themselves proper, be able to contain the virus, and be able to build something with which they can recover from this crisis and be able to build a better future for themselves. One other point I want to mention before I leave, two other points that I want to mention before I leave. I must praise the government for the leadership that it is providing. We have worked with them to have a fairly good idea about where we're going and how we're going to organize ourselves. And this, when I say we, I mean the UN and the international community as a whole. We have been concerting our efforts, discussing together. You may have received that we have a UN comprehensive plan, which in fact is being also discussed by the other non-UN international community so that we can finalize it properly. The government is also having its national comprehensive plan, which should be out probably in the coming 2 days. All these are based on the Secretary General's guidelines that he set, that we work on the health crisis, but we also make sure that the community's needs are addressed, the vulnerable needs are addressed, and that the community's resilience is strengthened, and that we can get ourselves poised for development. So all these two major response plans would indicate that. Now, I just want to make a slight comment on what Mary Brown said about the pillars that are in place. I want to emphasize the fact that we in the international community, particularly the UN, appreciate the fact that these pillars have now been put in place and staffed by people who are technically competent and committed across the political divide. They made it a real Liberian approach. It didn't matter where anybody stood in the politics of this country, in which government has served before or intends to serve in. Everybody who has the technical competence is now in the place. We feel therefore competent as the UN to work with them at the opposite number, supporting them as the donors, not only as the international community, providing the technical competence that we can put at their disposal, and also the networking capacities that we have, and the norms and the values and the structure that we think we can follow to beat this virus and use it to move forward. So I am full of praise for what the government has been able to do. My last point, however, is that all these things are done with money. I have the French ambassador in front of me, and he knows this expression. Money is le nerf de la guerre. So we need the money. We need all these resources, especially for a country that has a bit of difficulty because it's an IMF program. We would want all the support we can get in terms of resource. Now that the government has set up strong leadership under the key involvement of the president and competent people in the place, I'm sure when the resources are given, we will work with them to make sure that we get value for money. Thank you very much once again. Thanks for coming again when we're in need of you. And we hope that you'll be able to support us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manning, and thank you so much for the very good work that you're doing on the ground in challenging circumstances. Thank you so much. I would now like to give the floor to Dr. Kwima Ntara, the country manager for Liberia from the World Bank. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm sorry that you cannot see me. I'm connecting by phone. I have had a technical issue with my computer, but it's pleased to participate in this meeting. Ambassadors, colleagues from international development partner organizations, cabinet ministers who've joined, Madam Bro, who is the national coordinator for the COVID-19 response. I don't have much to add, but just to make 2 points. The first is that I would like to really recognize the leadership, commitment, and flexibility that the government has shown in fighting this COVID-19 pandemic. This has really made it very easy for us from the various agencies to mobilize support because of the leadership and flexibility that the government has shown. But we also think it has helped a lot in instilling confidence amongst the population in the direction that the government is taking in dealing with this situation. And I think this is going to be very critical, especially in a time of crisis like this. Secondly, I would also like to say that we're quite pleased with the way the international community has come together in supporting Liberia, starting with the technical support that has been provided by the UN Resident Coordinator's Office to the government in terms of coordination, but also the support that WHO has been providing to the Ministry of Health, as well as the National Public Health Institute of Liberia in dealing with the health response. But also let me say that it's been quite heartening to see how various other agencies, both UN agencies as well as bilateral donors and other multilateral agencies have come together in providing the support to the government. We couldn't have been more coordinated, and this couldn't have been more important than at this time. While the Minister of Finance, for example, mentioned the support that the World Bank is providing to the immediate health response, but let me say that already a number of agencies, starting from UNICEF, UNFPA, UNDP, ECOWAS, USAID, EU, and various others have already been moving to provide quick support to the government in terms of providing some of the materials required, the health supplies, the testing kits, PPEs. These are things that perhaps don't make the news, but from our side, we think these have actually been really the saving grace, because much as we might be bringing in some more significant support financially, but it takes time to even utilize these kinds of resources. So I would like to recognize the role that the various partners have been playing, therefore, in supporting the government in the immediate health response. Finally, just to also say that it's very heartening to see how the government, as well as the government partners, are also not just looking at the immediate health response, but the medium-term social and economic impact that the pandemic is likely to have on Liberia, because this is going to be very critical also in the consolidation of peace. There is always a risk that a crisis like this can destabilize the economy, the social fabric, and therefore it's important that we all have an eye on ensuring that while we help the government to immediately respond to the health issues, but we also put in place a program that can help deal with the various economic and social impacts of the crisis. And again, in this context, I'd like to thank the government for the leadership that they've shown in outlining their plan, the areas where they want support, be it in the food distribution, as of course part of the immediate health response, but even in the medium term in ensuring that there will be food security in Liberia, because as the crisis continues, global supply chains are likely to be disrupted, and Liberia is very much dependent on imported food. And so it's good to see that the government has a plan for that. But also it's good that the government has a plan in terms of mobilizing communities to help deal with these situations, because when the communities are involved and other stakeholders, including the legislature, there is ownership in programs such as these. So just to echo what the resident coordinator mentioned earlier, it is therefore very critical that the government, through the various committees that have been set up, but also the national coordinator's office, is paying enough attention to the need to involve the communities and other stakeholders in dealing with the crisis. So let me stop here once again, and just to say that we are here to support Liberia, and we work together with all the development partners in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ntara. Very important remarks there. I'm glad you brought up the confidence of the population in the efforts by the government. That's, of course, an important factor, as well as you and other speakers have pointed to the not only the immediate needs, but also the more medium and long-term socioeconomic challenges and their impact and effect on the peace-building efforts in the country. Thank you so much, and I will now open up for comments from colleagues in New York. And as I said before, please indicate in the chat room if you would like to take the floor. And I recognize first the permanent representative of Japan. Kimihiro, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. As you said, we had a very good discussion with the chair, under the chair of Andrea last Wednesday at the PBC. I think one of the takeaways was to hold country-specific meeting to put all ongoing and planned multilateral and bilateral assistance on the table, so that all of us are able to see what everyone else is doing or going to do. And another takeaway was to compile best practices and examples to respond better to the crisis. So in both respects, I think today's meeting is most timely, for which I'm really grateful to you, Anna. Liberia has been in the process of building back better after the civil war and the Ebola outbreak. And now COVID-19 poses a further complex challenge to human security in the country. While our annual ODA cooperation with Liberia stands around 19 to 20 million US dollars per year, Japan has recently extended 270,000 USD through UNICEF for health and capacity building cooperation, and is now considering additional support to African countries through supplementary budget to be discussed at the Diet. So we are trying to stand by Liberian people to the best we can. But here today, I would like to share with you some lessons learned from Japan's experience in Liberia, affected by the Ebola crisis, which has, of course, serious socioeconomic implications beyond public health challenge. To cope with such human security crisis where people's dignity is at stake, a people-centered and a comprehensive approach is essential. And that's important to sustain the people's confidence in the government. So from this standpoint, we have supported a multi-agency program in Liberia from 2014 to 17 through our contribution to the UN Trust Fund for Human Security. And it helped strengthen the health system, empowered women in the agricultural sector, and provided employment and food security in the affected communities. Japan also partnered with UN agencies such as FAO, UNIDO, and UNICEF to build Liberia's capacity in agriculture, fishery, and other sectors, as well as youth employment. Bilaterally, Japan sent medical aid to help Liberia combat the public health emergency, but has also been supporting the country's mid to long-term efforts to build back better from civil war and the Ebola crisis. We helped strengthen the national and local healthcare systems, provided capacity building, and supported the development of domestic industries and transportation infrastructure through JICA's grant and technical assistance. So in this challenging time, the PBC needs to keep supporting the Liberian government as it seeks to achieve the pro-poor agenda for prosperity and development and the SDGs, where the humanitarian development peace nexus is at stake. Before concluding my remarks, just let me ask a question to briefers. Since the Ebola outbreak, UN health system and humanitarian system have decided to coordinate closely by adopting the SOP and so forth. How is the actual coordination is taking place or unfolding on the ground in Liberia? And is UN development system also working together? That's my question. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the support you are doing in cooperation with Liberia. Very appreciated. I now like to give the floor to someone who is very dear to the Liberia Confederation, the former chair of the Liberia, PBC Liberia configuration, now head of the EU delegation, Ambassador Olof Skog. Olof, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Anna-Karin, and thank you to all briefers. It's really heartening to see also ministers and the UN system coming together in this way. I had the privilege, I must say, to visit Liberia and its neighbors during the Ebola situation. So, of course, to see how the country now is responding to another pandemic, it's both very sad that we're back to that similar challenge, but it's also encouraging to see how the country is coming together, because I think right now one of the key words has to be unity. I mean, Europe has gone through and is still trying to cope with this terrible pandemic, but I think there is also a very clear understanding that this is somehow we're all in this together. It's one book, it's one story. It's just that we are in different chapters of that same story, so unity among us as countries, as organizations, but also unity inside countries. So I also think this is a strong message to Liberia to find the political unity to focus on this one challenge right now. And so congratulations to the way you've been able to keep this together up to now, and a very strong support by the European Union in all your efforts. I think just to list a few issues. One is the healthcare system. Obviously, there needs to be, we understand there's an increasing strain on it, and there needs to be capacity building in this area, and so I think for the international community as well to come in strong support, because that is the first line of defense. I think we fully are behind the state of emergency declaration by the president, as they are aimed at saving lives. However, there is also, of course, the balance to be struck with the cost that this will have on the economic and social situation for many Liberians, which is already super fragile for many. That there has to be an understanding that there needs to also be the capacity to generate income to cover and support the basic needs. And therefore, I welcome and commend the special measures just proposed by President Weah to the legislature to address the needs of Liberian households at these difficult times. And I want to say that the European Union stands ready to provide support to these measures. And as in any state of emergency, of course, the security sector has a special role to play, but we have to also remind ourselves that that role is one of always, using those measures in a proportionate and responsible way. I want to commend the Liberian government's efforts to strengthen the country's response, the National Response Coordinator and the Compliance Manager, and the new structure of response coordination. So we very much welcome the appointment of Mary Bro and Ambassador Findabundu, and again, ready to support in any way we can. I know that there's a very close coordination going on, and it was confirmed by the UN and the ministers speaking earlier. And I think that is, again, the kind of unity that is now needed. So if we can use this crisis to work really close together, and that these new preparedness and response coordination structures, we support their focus on health, on community support, economic management, livelihoods, food security, social protection, rule of law, human rights, as well as communication. I remember during the Ebola situation that the communication of the government left a few things to be desired, but it was also a clear challenge. So I think that should not be forgotten. So again, we're ready to support in all this. we are behind Liberia, we are behind the WHO. And I want to say here to everyone that we very much regret the decision by the United States to pull out of the WHO. We think that's a very erroneous decision at a time when the International Health Organization, the WHO, is more needed than ever. So WHO will count on our continued support, and we know that Liberia will benefit from their support. Finally, maybe just to say that we are confident that the challenge now, which is massive around the world and to Liberia, will not put back the achievements made when it comes to this construction of and consolidation of peace. That we need to be vigilant on that, but I think the Peacebuilding Commission has a very strong role, and I want to thank you, Anna Karin, for bringing us together, and I'm encouraged by the kind of coordination that is there, and that how everyone is playing their part, and the EU is ready to step up as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olof, and I totally agree with what you said about the importance of unity, also on the importance of support to the WHO. Is dealing with a very an enormous challenge right now. I thank you very much for the support and the engagement both on the ground and from here in New York. Thank you so much. I now like to give the floor to the permanent representative of Ireland. Geraldine, you have the floor, and you will be followed by the permanent representative of Canada. Geraldine, you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Karen, and colleagues, delighted to join the meeting this morning. Ministers in Monrovia, it's a real honour to be with you, and I have to say, such a reassuring message from you to New York this morning, that not just that you're taking all what you've described to us as the frantic efforts on the ground to contain this crisis, but importantly that you're listening also to the advice of friends. And I think that's the big virtue of this sort of gathering, that we get an opportunity to exchange with you, and that our wishes that you are reinforced by everything we're doing with you both on the ground in Monrovia and through New York is actually a joined up effort. So I think that's very reassuring. I have to say, Ireland, you know us well, we're on the ground with you in Monrovia. You know that we fully are determined to share your efforts there to make sure that this crisis does not put you off track in the impressive gains you've made consolidating peace. As we've just heard, Ireland's an EU member state, of course, and Olaf clearly described our determination as the EU to support you there, but also in the big efforts you have. I think your Minister for Finance described your acutely weak healthcare system. That's something that Ireland's efforts on the ground with you in Monrovia, with a 5-year plan that we're working on now, is trying to bolster for you. I think you made the important points, Minister, that learning from the earlier Ebola crisis is really important. That shed light on where the structural and resource weaknesses were. We are now in Ireland working to restructure that support that we're giving you to cope with this current crisis. And so we welcome very much your appointment of Mary Brough, who we know will act as an excellent coordinator. I had a couple of specific points I wanted to raise with you, Ministers, before concluding by reassuring you of our solidarity. One is in relation to your own excellent pro-poor agenda and to your capacity now to keep that on track, particularly in relation to food and nutrition security. It's linked to my second point, which is in relation to women, poor girls and women. We have been in Ireland working particularly to assist you in that domain. And we know that women, of course, have a particular role to play in assuring food and nutrition security in crisis environments. So I just wonder if you can guide us a little more as to what specifically and which aspects of your own agenda we can be particularly helpful on. Your elections planned for later in the year, Senate elections, a really important phase of your own democratic evolution post-crisis, of course. and there surely will be an impact on that. And we're happy to hear from you if, as partners, we can look to supporting you in whatever that impact is on timing, on management of those elections. And finally, really just to say to you from New York, you have a friend in Ireland. You know us there. I see my colleague from the embassy on the system, Kate, with you. So I want to reassure you that as we work with you, we are also listening very clearly to the messages we're getting from you. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, and thank you for your concrete questions and points as well. I now give the floor to the permanent representative of Canada, Marc-André Blanchard. Marc-André, and then followed by the permanent representative of Brasilia. Marc-André, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Anna, and thanks for convening us today on this with our friends from Liberia. Thank you, ministers, for being there, and I want to also salute the PR of Liberia, a very good friend of ours, D. Maxwell. Thank you for being with us, and thanks for your engagement throughout the UN. And the Minister Sirleaf, you've mentioned a few points where your strategy was around, you know, the support to your healthcare system throughout this, and the support of the reconciliation, and the support of the national economy. I would just like to know when you've mentioned that you fear for the small and medium-sized enterprises, is there anything specific that the international community could help you with there? Because I think it's important. I think it's the jobs must be saved as much as we can throughout the world, because that's how we're going to restart the economy quickly, and that's how we're going to, keep our economy and our societies more peaceful and less prone to social unrest and the likes. So that's one question. The other question that is related to that, and I was very happy to see that Liberia is such a, yes, there are some challenges, but it's such a good story because, on the one hand, the government is doing a lot of things and is the confidence of the population in the government and their measure. So congratulations for that. And then the other side of when I heard the RC that, about and the other briefers who came in and said that the international community is coming together in Liberia. So that's comforting. But the other issue that I wanted to ask you was about what is your fear and how do you see the issue of food security? I mean, is it a problem? Is it a threat that you see in the short term? And if yes, how can we help you? And if not, then how do you see that? Do you see that in the midterm or the longer term, or if it's not on your radar screen at all? This is an attempt for us at the UN to actually try to assess what can be done with that respect. So thank you very much.
Marc-André, thank you so much, and again, thanks for the convening the meeting. A very constructive meeting we had last week on the COVID response and PBC. I'd now like to give the floor to the permanent representative of Brazil, Ronaldo Costa, followed by the DPR from Canada. Ronaldo, you have the floor. Ronaldo, you have to unmute your microphone.
Okay, now you can hear me. Okay, so I'll start again. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for convening this meeting, and it's useful. As you yourself reminded us that the chair of the PBC had convened a meeting last week to get the PBC itself more engaged in following up the impacts of COVID on countries that are in transition from conflict to sustained peace. I think this is very useful. This is, I think, the precise focus that the PBC has to maintain, and something which I am very aware as a peer of yours as chair of the configuration. So we know the particular difficulties. And in this case, as we mentioned last week, I think the focus of the PBC is not to try and address the COVID-19 itself, because there are other agencies and programs and funds and so on which are specific and doing a wonderful job on that. But the key focus we have to maintain here is to ensure that these countries, already so vulnerable, do not more or less slip in the cracks at the time when everyone else is naturally turning its focus inwards, because the crisis is affecting each and every one of us. So it's incumbent upon us to keep the focus and remind the international community of what has to be done, always with a focus on the medium to long-term socioeconomic development, because this is the foundation of sustained peace, and always, let me say, in line with the priorities identified by the government itself. Let me just say, and I forgot to mention at the outset, my gratitude to the ministers of Liberia and all the other briefers for the very interesting statements they made. And if I may say, despite the acuteness of the crisis, the information conveyed is encouraging in many ways. Now, moving back, let me say that even though, as I said, that combating the health crisis itself is not the priority focus of the PBC, we must be very aware that minimizing the impacts of the health crisis due to the COVID-19 will minimize the socioeconomic impacts. I mean, the quicker and the less profound the impact of the health crisis is on the Liberian economy, the quicker and stronger it can grow out of the situation and back onto a track of development to ensure a sustained peace. And in this, I think perhaps one element where the international community can help is ensuring that Liberia has access to the required medical supplies and medicines. I mean, we've seen that the overwhelming demand globally for these products has caused problems even for developed countries in procuring equipment and medicines. So any help that agencies and the international community can give to Liberia, I think, would be key in this respect. Finally, let me just say, comment on two issues. If I could refer to Dr. Amaning's statement and say that this is one of the very encouraging statements I saw, and I'm particularly grateful for the fact that as a resident coordinator, they're already looking at if I can say, at the day after, in that they're trying to find positives from this crisis, in that it's being a helpful, if I understood you correctly, it's being a positive instrument in institution building in Liberia. And this is, of course, I think this is the kind of attitude you have to have. You have to try and extract the positives from a very, very difficult situation. And finally, the World Bank mentioned the issue of food security, and this is something my colleague Marc-André Blanchard also mentioned. And just to remind everyone that Brazil, along with Canada, Egypt, and Italy, is co-hosting a discussion this coming Friday on food security and how to minimize the impact of COVID-19 on the availability and supply of food worldwide, which is one potential obstacle and consequence of COVID-19. So I think it's an important and useful debate for us to have next Friday. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ronaldo, and thank you for reminding us on putting the COVID-19 into a larger context when we talk about the support from the Peacebuilding Commission, and several have mentioned the social economic impact of the COVID pandemic, and that's really the focus of our discussion. Can I, before I give the floor to the DPR of Kenya, just remind everyone to be as brief as possible so we can let Monrovia come back, and quite a few questions posed to Monrovia. So if we can be brief, that would give them more time. So I now give the floor to the DPR of Kenya, followed by the DPR of Egypt. Susan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor, and thank you for convening this country-focused meeting. I have listened closely to the Minister, the Honorable Minister of Finance and Development and Planning, Honorable Samuel Toya, and the Minister for Internal Affairs, Honorable Vani Salif, and the resident coordinator. And I want to thank all the briefers for the hands-on informative briefings. And I want to echo the representative of Brazil that the information that is coming from Liberia is very, very encouraging. It is evident that the human crisis is not happening in a vacuum, and we've had that Liberia, just like Kenya and other sub-Saharan African countries, are trying very hard to grapple with the COVID-19 pandemic, while also trying to maintain social cohesion, political stability, and keeping the economies afloat. But behind the data and the policy, they are the people of Liberia who are experiencing the cumulative effect of these challenges. And this pandemic is yet another reminder that peace building must be first and foremost, people-centered and strategically inclusive in order to address the needs of the most vulnerable segments of the population. And secondly, my delegation commends the efforts of the government of Liberia in partnering with international stakeholders, in particular the approach of having a national response coordinator, Honorable Mary brought to coordinate the national and multi-sector response plan, and a national compliance manager. That is really encouraging. We are also confident that the experience of these two women leaders in public service will positively impact local investigation and coordination measures. Thirdly, Madam Chair, and before I finish, we welcome the efforts of the UN country team, the IMF, the World Bank, the Peacebuilding Fund, as well as bilateral efforts in ensuring that financial gaps are being identified and projects are being prioritized in alignment with Liberia's national needs and initiatives within the COVID-19 situation. Excellencies, colleagues, Liberia has gone through a successful transition process from the UN peacekeeping mission, UNMIL, and this peace gain should be safeguarded within the national framework. Furthermore, Liberia continued and committed efforts to fully recover from the 2014-2015 Ebola crisis, in which the country, compared to the other countries in the region, had a significantly large number of its population lose their lives. It is critical to document the lessons learned and the good practices we are hearing from Liberia now to inform the preventive work of the Commission moving forward. And it is within this context that my delegation has confidence that with the strategic investment and meaningful partnership between the international community and the national leadership, the resilience of the people of Liberia will carry them through once again, and Kenya stands with solidarity with the government and the people of Liberia as we all grapple with this COVID-19. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. I now give the floor to the DPR of Egypt, followed by the DPR from the United Kingdom. Baida, you have the floor.
Hello, just checking that you can hear me.
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, for convening this timely meeting, and take the opportunity to acknowledge and thank the Minister of Finance and Development and Planning and the Minister of Internal Affairs of Liberia, and commend the efforts of the Liberian government in their in all the global efforts to combat COVID-19, and lend support to the efforts of the Liberian population and their resilience in coming through this, like all the rest of us, hopefully. I also commend them along with the UN resident coordinator in Liberia and the World Bank representative for the thoughtful and comprehensive briefings that we just received. To be brief, Madam Chair, today's meeting offered a good opportunity to learn about the peace-building priorities in Liberia in the context of COVID-19. And the PBC should explore ways to mobilize international attention and support to nationally owned efforts like we are seeing in Liberia, with a view to mitigate the potential for the destabilizing impact of COVID-19 economically and societally on the development in Liberia, and what that may entail to risk the reversing of peace gains. Having listened to the national peace-building priorities of Liberia, Egypt is of the view that the PBC, in exercising its bridging role, should engage with international and regional partners, including international financial institutions, to consider the following: strengthening the country's healthcare system through medical aid and capacity building. That seems to be a current priority. The provision of economic stimulus packages, which includes debt relief and deferred payments, waiver of all interest payments on bilateral and multilateral debt, and in order to provide immediate fiscal space and liquidity to government. Fostering a coherent and coordinated response to COVID-19 pandemic in supporting Liberia in order to avoid fragmentation and duplication of efforts. In conclusion, the Liberian government, our brothers, our sisters there, they know that they have the full support of Egypt, the full support that we can provide in overcoming the destabilizing impact. And I wish to also highlight that today, just for colleagues, I don't know how many have had a chance to look at it, but there's a very interesting article that was published today in the Financial Times. In the opinions, its title is "Only Victory in Africa Can End the Global Pandemic," and it's an article that has been written by 17 world leaders, cross-regional, European and African, among them His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of Egypt, and it highlights the particular risks that Africa is going through, and how that focus should become a source of attention for the international community in the coming period. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, colleagues, and best of luck.
Thank you so much for these remarks and comments, and for your recommendation on the article in Financial Times. We will follow up. I'd like to give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of the United Kingdom, followed by Norway. James, you have the floor.
Many thanks to you, Madam Chair. I'm also really, really grateful to the ministers from Liberia for their contributions, and also to the resident coordinator for setting the scene for us. I thought it was really compelling how he talked about how when we met in November, we saw some serious risks still on the horizon, and the concerns that we set out then, and how when there were discussions again in January, and particularly the President's statement, it felt like there's a bit more optimism and plans in place. There's clearly close collaboration, both with the resident coordinator and with the donor community. And we'd seen some real successes in the consolidation of peace, which is something, of course, the UK government has been firmly committed to through our aid program in Liberia. So this comes on a sort of foundation of what we know is continuing instability, but at a time where Liberia felt like it was turning a corner. I think we need to really make sure that we don't let this stop that corner being turned. But as we know already in the UK, COVID is a significant challenge. And as Liberia knows from its Ebola experience, health crises like this have significant implications. So with this in mind, it was very good to see Madam Bro being appointed into her role. I've got 3 points to make. The first relates to that, and that's that a coordinated whole of government response is really key to tackling COVID. And we were really glad to hear both from the government briefers, but also from Madam Bro, how Liberia is now pulling together that coordinated response. We do think that having really clearly defined structures will help the government organize itself and will help the government direct its planning and capacity in the best way possible. But it'd be very useful to understand in particular, and perhaps this is a question to Madame Bro, how the government plans to prioritize that effort, how the government plans to direct its operations as effectively as possible so that it does the most important activity first, and that it engages with the donors in a way that facilitates that. So how do you make the national response as effective as possible in these circumstances? The second point is really just about directing the additional COVID-19 funding as wisely as possible, ensuring it goes to those areas that are really critical to the COVID-19 response. And I think one of the things we've seen so far, and we've seen this globally, not just in Liberia, but is as countries struggle to respond to this, perhaps they're not being as clear as they can be in directing funds to the areas of greatest need. So how do you draw on the experience of others as they're tackling their COVID responses to make sure we do that? And I think part of that is about bringing the donor community into the center of those discussions as well, and really using us as a sounding board for some of the work that you're doing. So it'd be useful to know how exactly, and again, this is a question for the ministers or perhaps from Madame Bro, how do you plug that donor community support and advice as seamlessly as possible into your decision making? And my third point really was to come back to where Mr. Amaning began, which was, just last November, Liberia was still tackling these significant political and socioeconomic challenges. And to prevent the impact of COVID undermining that optimism from January, it's really critical that the steps that you take now protect the most vulnerable and the most disenfranchised. And this is really critical both in the health response, but I think it's also really critical in other areas. And I heard the minister talk about food security, and I know the UN are concerned about this as well. How do you work with us to make sure that this is a phased response? How do you make sure that we tackle the health issues first, but also make sure that those don't move into humanitarian issues with early planning and early moves to prevent that? How do we then do what we can to ensure the socioeconomic impacts are offset? And all of that to try and ensure that in no way are any of the setbacks that will inevitably come from COVID are able to affect the political stability that Liberia has seen very recently. I thought that the point from the Ambassador of Japan on building back better was really critical. We're already engaged with you in helping you to build back better, but how do we think through the impact of COVID as we look at the long-term development planning and make sure that what we've learnt from the lessons of this are incorporated into that? And finally, it's good to see our ambassador, Mr. Belgrove. In fact, just on the pane below me on the computer screen here, you will continue to have the UK's full support as we work with you through this. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for that, and thanks for your very concrete and relevant questions to Monrovia. We'll let Monrovia come in as soon as we are ready with the interventions from New York. I'd like now to give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Norway, followed by the DPR of France. So Oddinge, you have the floor.
Thank you, Annika, for convening us, and thanks so much to Ministers Wea and Sirleaf, and also to the other presenters. Now, the spread of the COVID virus calls for international solidarity, and cooperation is, of course, the way forward. The UN, not the least the WHO, must be at the center of our efforts. Otherwise, we will have a patchwork of bilateral efforts with less coordination, less coherence. It's necessary actions to contain the virus has financial impacts. And I would like to make a general point in this regard. The flexibility, the swift and individual responses that we see from the UN funds and programs as well as on the peace building side, is made possible by core funding. In the time ahead, with pressures on budgets around the world, we have to protect this key source of funding for Liberia and for others. Now, it is important that the international community supports the national authorities of Liberia in their efforts to fight the virus and build back better. Norway fully supports the efforts of the UN, IMF, World Bank, and others to tackle the COVID-19 challenge. We are pleased that the UN reacted quickly to our proposal for UN COVID-19 response and recovery fund, to which Liberia also will be eligible. Now, peace building and sustaining peace is a long-term effort, and Liberia has made important progress in peace building over the years. This has been fundamental in order to achieve stability and economic development. The COVID-19 increases the risk of setback. No efforts must be spared in securing a sustainable peace. Inclusion of women in all aspects and levels of their society is important. Now, I couldn't agree more with Ambassador Costa. Progress must not slip because of the coronavirus. Liberia is working hard and needs our support. So, Madam Chair, let me once again reaffirm Norway's long-standing support for Liberia and the work of the Peacebuilding Commission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Norway, and thank you for your support. Can I now give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of France, followed by the DPR of Bangladesh. Anne, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Anna-Karine, and really many thanks for scheduling this Liberia configuration meeting of the PBC. As we said last week during the excellent meeting convened by Canada, PBC can really have a role in mobilizing attention and support, and today to mobilize support to Liberia in preserving the peace building gains that have been made while responding to the COVID-19 crisis. And the first comment I'd like to make is a more general remark on our collective duty to help our African partners in tackling the COVID pandemic. Our excellent ambassador in Monrovia, Terence Will, was quoted by one of our briefers, and as he said, money talks. And this is why France is currently calling for an international initiative to fight the COVID-19 in African countries, so as to face the many challenges that the pandemic is posing at the health, at the humanitarian, at the scientific, and at the macroeconomic level. And this is, we are developing this in two directions. The first one, you might have seen that President Macron has appealed to alleviate the weight of the debt burden for African countries. And the second dimension is that we have also pledged significant support for the fight against COVID in Africa with a funding of 1.2 billion that was announced by our Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian last week, and the main operator implementing that will be the French Agence Française de Développement. So between now and this summer, the AFD will deploy the COVID-19 Shared Health Initiative. Now, regarding Liberia, as for other African countries, the big wave of the pandemic is unfortunately still ahead of us, and we have only a little time to prepare the immediate response to try to really limit to the maximum the impact. And as the permanent representative of Brazil said, the less devastating the health impact is, the better it would be for the socioeconomic fabric of the country. We know that Liberia has already overcome a lot. It has overcome a war, it has overcome the Ebola epidemic, it has the capacity to build on the number of lessons learned, but nevertheless, this pandemic is going to strain the country's capacities. So my immediate question is, what type of support do you need more of for the immediate response, so as to limit the destabilizing impact of the pandemic? And I also like to echo what the AU ambassador Olaf Scott was saying about the importance when we are in the prevention strategy, the importance of a good communication strategy, a communication strategy that enhances and preserves national unity and social cohesion. And I'd be very interested if our briefers in Monrovia could tell us a bit more about this communication strategy and prevention strategy. And many of the briefers and the previous speakers also emphasized the need to look beyond the immediate horizon and to focus on the medium term. And here I think we all agree that we need to recover better and to help Liberia build a resilient economy that is in line with the Agenda 2030 and also with the Paris Agreement. So in Liberia as elsewhere, the challenge is going to design economic response that is green and that is sustainable. And here I'd like to ask how these dimensions will be integrated in the COVID response programs in Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, and appreciation for your initiative on the support to the African countries. As we have said last week in the meeting on COVID that Marc-André chaired, I think many of the countries that we have on the Peacebuilding Commission's agenda are very vulnerable and therefore in need of our continued support and increased support. Can I now give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Bangladesh, followed by the United States. Tarek, you have the floor.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for convening today's meeting, which is very timely and important. And I would also like to thank the briefers and honorable ministers for their useful briefing. The whole world, in fact, all of us are going through a crisis of a lifetime. And at this challenging time, I think it's all the more important for the PBC to live up to the expectation. And we see that holding this meeting at this challenging circumstances is a manifestation that the PBC is up to its mandate. Indeed, PBC's engagement is crucial in consolidating the peace gains in Liberia, and we stand in solidarity with Liberia. It is good to hear about the early preparedness and the ongoing national efforts currently being undertaken, and particularly keeping in mind the medium and long-term perspectives in the consideration. And we congratulate the authorities in Liberia for all their good work. It is also good to hear about the support already flowing into the country, which is very important. I have two questions in this regard. Question one is about the vulnerable population. We know that for any crisis, addressing the vulnerable population holds the key to success of any national effort. And this is more true in the case of COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to know what particularly are population, particularly the women and youth. And the second question is about the regional support. We know that all the supports are coming from World Bank, international community, and also through bilateral channels. I'd like to know what about the regional support. How is that coming, and what are the plans for the region to support Liberia? We all know that every country is in a challenging state, but I think a regional coordinated effort would also help the countries in the region to come up better in addressing the crisis. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much. And finally, I give the floor to the United States Counselor for Economic and Social Affairs, Jason Mack. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ennerstrom, for convening us today, and to the distinguished ministers and other briefers. We thank all parts of the UN system that are combating the pandemic and continuing the important work of building peace and resilience country by country, including in Liberia. We know that comprehensive solutions are required to help countries mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and to deliver results. So we welcome the robust support through the UN Response Plan, World Bank funding, and the IMF Extended Credit Facility. We hope the Commission can leverage its advisory role to support further coordination across these efforts. To help countries focus on the crisis and recovery, as the G7 finance ministers announced yesterday, the United States stands ready, along with our counterparts, to provide a time-bound suspension on debt service payments due on official bilateral claims for all countries eligible for World Bank concessional financing, if joined by all bilateral official creditors in the G20 and as agreed with the Paris Club. Separately from that, the United States is a leader in the world's humanitarian and health response to COVID-19 pandemic. We recognize the importance of food security and potential impacts on future generations. With that in mind, we remain the largest donor to the World Food Program and UNICEF. And on April 8th, we announced an additional $225 million in health, humanitarian, and economic assistance to further boost response efforts worldwide, which follows on the $274 million in aid already deployed, bringing our total COVID-focused international assistance to nearly $500 million. In the case of Liberia, as Minister Twea noted, the US government is working to realign our support in line with needs on the ground. We appreciate our close partnership with the government of Liberia in addressing this crisis. My colleagues who've previously spoken already put forward quite a few questions, so I will not add to the list, but I wish to reaffirm that the United States remains focused on humanitarian concerns and the importance of coordinated efforts, including the work of the Commission and other UN entities, to help mitigate the impacts of this crisis in Liberia and around the world. Working together, we will get through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I will now revert back to Monrovia. There are quite a few questions, and I just noted a few of them on coordination on the ground, the communication strategy, food security, women and girls, situation on the elections, small and medium enterprises, priorities, type of support, the most vulnerable population. Those are just a few of the questions. My proposal would be that I would first give the floor to the foreign minister if he would like to make a few points, and followed by the special representative of ECOWAS to Monrovia, Ambassador Aiji Soma. Foreign Minister, are you still with us, and would you like to say a few words?
Yes, yes,
Please
I'm
go
still
ahead.
with you. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. First of all, let me extend my thanks and appreciation to all of you, my colleagues and ambassadors and representatives on this committee. We want to extend our thanks and appreciation to the UN. We also want to acknowledge support for the Secretary General call for a ceasefire globally. As you know, Liberia and President Weah policy of a peaceful world is one that we subscribe to. And so it's in the right direction, and we want to strongly support the call of the Secretary General for ceasefire in the world. The issue for us is simple, that the coronavirus is a threat to the stability of peace that we enjoy today. There are economic issues, there are social issues, there are political issues. And Liberia is faced with a daunting task of being able to address all of these issues in terms of how we will continue to build peace in Liberia. We would like to appeal to all of our partners for their support in making sure that we can fight the coronavirus, as well as continuing to build on the peace process that we've come thus far. We don't want that to be a focus of change, to focus everything on the coronavirus and forget about the peace-building process that we have to continue. Yes, of course, the virus is going to take away some resources, but we still need to be able to look beyond the virus when it's gone, when we have dealt with it, which I believe that the world is going to deal with. We are going to come to this pandemic, and what happens after is what we have to deal with. We've experienced Ebola in the past, and we know what it did to our economy. We still a fragile state, and we still have to be able to address all of the issues that affect the common people. As I always say, that the whole objective is to provide living quarters for people. People must be able to feed the children, send the children to school, and look forward for a greater future. This is what the government of Liberia is trying to do, is to give hope, give Liberians hope for a better future. I will stop there and want to say thanks to all of my colleagues who have adequately addressed issues that are affecting Liberia, and leave that with them to be able to address some of the issues and concerns that have been raised. I want to thank all of you.
Thank you so much, Foreign Minister. Tack så mycket. And I totally agree with you. And I think this is really the task of this configuration, as you said, to fight the coronavirus at the same time as you continue to build peace in the country. And I think this is very much the task that we will continue to work on with some of the concrete ideas that have come up during this meeting. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for taking your time to be with us, and we look forward to continuing working with you. I'd like now to give the floor to Ambassador Ajisomo from ECOWAS, and I would suggest then that we let Minister Sirleaf come in. I think a lot of the questions were directed towards him. So Ambassador Ajisomo, please. Ambassador Ajisomo, we cannot hear you, at least I cannot hear you. Could you either unmute your microphone or speak a bit closer to the mic? Thank you.
Good afternoon. His Excellency is currently on another meeting right now, presently as I speak, with the President of ECOWAS on the COVID-19 briefing.
Okay, so then we will he can come back later on. I will then give the floor to the Minister.
Yes,
Minister Sirleaf, is he with us? Minister?
Minister Sirleaf is here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead, Minister. And there are quite a few questions directed to you, so we are eager to hear your response. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, Your Excellency, on this very great platform, I would like to take this time to congratulate Ambassador Ola Scoop on his appointment as ambassador to the United Nations from the European Union. He's a very good friend of Liberia. Congratulations. With respect to small businesses being mentioned by myself in my intro, the statement I made is that right now, our president directed my ministry to work with the Marketing Association in the observance of social distancing and what have you, under the state of emergency. So what is obtaining right now in Liberia, a small business owner, small petty traders, if you like, are not selling right now because we are concentrated only on full item. Non-full item sellers are put away. So that means that you will have them They are little capital consumed because they are not doing anything. They're not going to sell. They're not going to market anymore. Of course, that drop purchasing power further, generally. That is what I was referring to. So to be able to put them back on their feet and smaller shops that are closed because they're not food related, or they will need stimulus. When it comes to the question raised about food security, yes, we have a problem. Right now in our country, this is the planting season. This is the time now people are planting. You know, you talk about rice, you can talk about cassava, you can talk about planting and what have you. Generally, full planting season is now, and people are under the state of emergency. People work in groups, people work in pool system. That means group of 20 coming together to work, group of 30 coming together to work. But because we have to observe social distancing right now, the planting season is not as holistic as you would think, because people cannot come together in group. What is even very important that you all should know as Peacebuilding Commission ambassadors is that the ownership of the fight against COVID-19 is very encouraging. I need to say that to you because I'm in charge of the 15 counties to let you people know that our people taking ownership in the fight against COVID-19 under the leadership of our dynamic president is going very well. Every community, they are very cautious enough. The people are washing their hands, they're following the different protocol. This is primarily so because of the lesson learned from Ebola. So that is also helping the different communities. So I just wanted to add that there.
Thank you very much, Minister. There were some questions about the situation and the involvement of women. I don't know whether you and maybe someone else would like to pick that up in your replies. I don't know. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, what our president did in his wisdom, reorganizing the response, the national response under the leadership of Madame Bro. Their pillow heads were all put in place. I happen to be one of the pillow heads for community engagement, data management. But for when it comes to women and children, it's a standalone pillow. Led by our Minister of Gender and Children and Social Protection. So the women and children interest is fully embedded into the response effort and also the recovery effort. Right now, that pillow responds to the elderly in terms of food distribution. That is ongoing right now, even though we are a little bit challenged with resources, but under the window of our national government, we have started that with thanks to the Minister of Finance, the little support that coming. So that is a pillow, Your Excellency. Let me report to all of you that stands alone, but it's under the Minister of Gender, Children and Social Protection.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. And then I would like to give the floor to Finance Minister Tweya. Are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, could you? I'd like to give you the floor to reply to some of the questions or other comments that you may have.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to get the benefit of the insight and the perspective of the ambassadors of the peace-building framework to hear what they say. I noted a lot of scattering of ideas, and I've been able to analyze and put into different buckets, but I'll run through them quickly. First, I think, and I'll merge with this my closing comments. I think where we are now, it's about sharpening the focus to the response. We have a national response coordinator. We have multiple pieces in place. I think it's about the next big steps that we take to come ahead. So Corona, it's as much a health crisis as an economic crisis, because the prolongation of the pandemic has serious economic ramifications. So at one point you're calling it a health pandemic, but it's also a serious economic crisis. The IMF is now putting growth projection even worse than the Great Economic Recession of 2008. So this is why a concerted focus is needed at this stage in Liberia. The big things is going to be multiple contact tracings, big movements on testing with the kind of procurement that's coming in, so that we really understand where we are, and that we're not missing anything seriously. So I think that's one of the big push that's coming up. Supporting the healthcare system so that it delivers during this phase, using all of our partners, United Nations agencies who are helping with the procurement process, UNDP, for example, who's going to help in the social sector, coming up with some programs. All organization, all effort approach during this emergency phase. But also importantly, as one of the ambassadors said, not to forget about the long term, because I think this is a key point. Lots of resources poured in the country during the Ebola phase, but we probably are in a situation where it's like we're resetting, we're starting over. So it's important so that we keep focus on both the emergency phase, we bifurcate our focus on the emergency phase, but also the long-term planning through long-term health system strengthening. Okay, so I think that's a key point that we need to think about. And so when we're talking about coordination, it is working better, as all of these speakers have said. But there are areas that we can improve on in terms of some of this, in terms of how do we coordinate so that we solve the emergency now, but that we come ahead on the question of long-term healthcare strengthening, so that in the event of a recurrence, because it will happen again, may not be corona, it will be something, we don't start over, we don't hit the reset button, but we build long-lasting institutions that go on to tackle long-term problems on the health side. I think that's one area that we want to coordinate. Are we coordinating? What share of our resources is going to emergency? What share is going to long-term planning? What share is going to vulnerable households, particularly? So those are the areas that we're having conversations with our development partners. I've written letters to all of our development partners to see how we address coordination in a way that solves the binding constraints that we face, so that we can really say we spent our resources effectively. Striking a balance between social support and sustainability. I think the Ambassador Olaf raised that point. It's a very important point. The country, as the President said in his letter, does not have the resources to extend these supports, beyond a certain time. All right. I will provide briefing later on the medium-term outlook and just the IMF program we're on. We just don't have the resources. So it means we have to be able to do what we can do effectively. It's delivering food to households that have to stay put, so that we understand the health status of the country. That is a critical point. We need to do that, working with the World Food Program, as the President outlined. But we also need to know our limits. So how long can we do this? And then that brings into the question of agriculture and things like that. So somebody raised a question on elections. I think we need to talk about that. The President mentioned that the elections could be risked, and he wanted the legislators to ponder that possibility and come up with something in response to what he submitted. So today we have 5 commissioners confirmed. We don't have a chairman, but one of the confirmed commissioners is acting as a chairman. So they are supposed to put together a plan to come back to the government in terms of what is the conceivable impact of Corona on the timeline for holding, particularly the October elections. Are we still on course to hold October elections, looking at the state of emergency, looking at the lockdown, and looking at scenarios that could come in the next several weeks? They're presenting a response plan to the government, and then informed by that, the government will make certain decisions. The government has mobilized some funding for elections. We now have a recast budget that has amounts. So we've earmarked specific fundings for elections that we're setting aside. These streams are not risked by the current situation. We're very clear to ensure that while we're fighting Corona, other parts of the government have to continue. So the Ministry of Finance, on the instruction of the President, have earmarked those resources. They're there. We're working. Once we get clarity on all of this, we're going to approach our development partners to look comprehensively at the whole electoral landscape and see how partners' contribution can be free, can chime in. And so that was just my bit on the elections piece. The role of the PAPD, it was stressed in some of the points. And I think, let me say first off that I don't see any unfortunate child as the PAPD since we came to office. The PAPD has been buffeted by streams of shocks. It's just left the macroeconomic shock in the last 2 years that we saw with liquidity crisis, the crunch, the macroeconomic crunch that we've been reeling through that led to the IMF program. Now, just when we were on the takeoff, and I will talk a bit about our performance under the program, another shock has come to hit the PAPD. So I think, Honorable Ambassadors, what has to be said here is that after 2 simultaneous back-to-back shocks, it seems we have to take a real look at the PAPD and cast it in post-macro, post-corona terms. And I think that work will be done along with all the relevant partners, particularly the United Nations Development Program and other partners around the table, to see how we can reassess our targets and maybe develop a smaller program to move for the rest of the years that are coming. That point has to be made. Medium-term outlook, it's always about the medium term, okay? The country faced serious challenges before joining the IMF program. We were about to do the preliminary review, the first review of the external credit facility that was signed last year when Corona hit. And so the IMF mission was not able to come to Liberia, but we've had extensive consultations. Preliminary reviews show very robust, strong performance on the fiscal side. The fund is particularly elated on the controls that the government have put in place, on the new cash management and liquidity systems that are working. They're noting that the government has stopped the accumulation of arrears. The government is only spending money that it has. The government has never borrowed from the central bank, even when it faced liquidity crisis in the current budget year. Those were outstanding. We met out of 4 performance criteria, quantitative QPC, quantitative performance criteria. On the fiscal side, we were able to meet 3. The one we missed was we missed by 2 days our payment of a concessional debt. That was what we missed. All of our performance on the deficit, the primary deficit, we exceeded by almost 200%. So the fund is quite clear that the country was on the path to recovery prior to Corona. On the monetary side, we also performed where there was a bit more challenges with liquidity, and we're still in the liquidity squeeze. So the fund understands that this was a one-off problem. The expectation is that on the next review, that problem is not going to recur. So we have both the micro, the monetary and the fiscal side performing well on this. So this means that we cannot lose sight of this level of progress we're making because of COVID. I've told the fund that even though there's a possible suspension of the external credit facility, we in the government are going to behave as if we still are under the ECF. Our spending priorities are still going to reflect the objectives of the ECF, and we're going to stay that course so that we get strong out of this crisis and get ahead on the medium term by looking at things like revenue mobilization. Revenue protection is critical. If Corona exacerbates our revenue situation and we lead to a point where revenue collapse, we will be in a more dire situation than even Corona has occasioned. So it seems like revenue protection, by now the estimate is that we're losing around about 1% of GDP, but it could get worse. So this is why the government is focused on really ensuring that we don't collapse our revenue base and to have to start all over, to rebuild that. Our revenue institutions are strong, and so we're quite focused on that. This is why the debt relief discussions on debt relief and the moratorium on concessional loans, and I welcome the position of the United States government on this. It's quite reassuring. The US government is behind these efforts. During these current spring meeting discussions, we're going to echo this point. The developing countries buffeted by Corona need the space to really come out of this crisis so that the medium term is stronger. If we have to focus on paying concessional loans, which can be a sizable amount, that'll be a problem. So some of the savings from the credit we're getting from the catastrophic containment relief fund of the IMF and some of the waivers that could come from the African Development Bank and the World Bank loans could be mobilized for the social sector and the vulnerable households. The President has promised to look at even the debt situation of local marketers, as Minister Vanis has said. He's promised to do something in that direction. On domestic debt, he's also promised to settle. As a government, we've not been paying our domestic debt for a long time, and this has exerted a serious problem in our economy. We don't have the fiscal space to service debt for the last 10 years. Many entities supplied goods to the government. They can't get paid because the government doesn't have the fiscal space. So what the president decided, and we're working with the fund to say, in the next budget year, we're going to allocate resources to begin servicing those debt. And so as part of the RCF that we're working with the fund, the domestic debt program is also in order. It has to be about agriculture. Now, the question now is we're delivering food through WFP, but this is the emergency phase. The long term, the medium term of that is that we have to capacitate our domestic production processes. Currently, the Ministry of Agriculture is working with the Ministry of Finance on delivering support to local farmers. There's a $900,000 support that I've signed as minister with the Ministry of Agriculture to provide that money to banks who would then lend on very flexible terms to local producers. That money is being dispatched. But beyond that resources, we need to find wider resources to support the agriculture sector. And so I think this is one area that we need to look at because it's a risk to peace. If people are not able to grow food, if people are vulnerable on a nutritional basis, that is a risk to peace. That is a risk to the good things that we've enjoyed since the UNMIL has left, and that we don't want to relapse into that crisis. So I think the food lens is critical here. I think I've covered quite a number of areas. I hear great news coming that your reception of our communication progress, your review, I think it's reassuring to hear that we're doing well, but we don't like to rest on our laurels. So it seems that we have to do more to find ways to improve and communicate better. But I think we can take that credit and that positive response. I don't know if I left anything, but I'll pause for now and share and pass on to colleagues.
Thank you very much, Minister. Very important remarks and comments on your economic and fiscal situation, key, of course, for the continued development, also on food security and the effects on the PAPD and the importance of building resilience. Thank you so much. I understand now that the Ambassador Ayesomo of ECOWAS is available, so I will give him the floor for some brief comments. Ambassador?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the floor. And let me begin by congratulating you, Anna Karine, on your preferment, your appointment as the chair of the Peacebuilding Liberian configuration. We've worked, the regional organization, I've worked very closely with your predecessor, and we've all enjoyed the contributions of Swedish leadership of the PBC, and also all the members of the PBC. They have been very supportive of Liberian configuration. And I see this opportunity to also thank the ministers, of finance, internal affairs, foreign affairs, who have been working so well with our development partners and our bilateral partners. Now, I know what everybody wants to hear. What is our regional response? This meeting, incidentally, I'm having, a dual meeting. As we are on, ECOWAS is also having a virtual meeting, with all our statutory appointees, with all the ambassadors in all our member states. And it's the same thing we're all saying. How do we strengthen our regional response? How do we strengthen our national response? What is the level of the coordination are we putting in place? Now, I want to start first with what ECOWAS, has been doing. Luckily, because of our experience, during the Ebola period, as you're all aware, we have a regional health specialized agency, which we call WAHO. And WAHO work closely with all our member states, especially the Mano River Union member states, Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, that were badly affected during the Ebola period. So what we did was, way back in February, we had put in place a mechanism, a framework, to assist our member states. And we held the first Health Assembly of Health Ministers was held on the 14th of February in Bamako, Mali, where all the health ministers from the sub-region, were given the protocol, were asked to go back to their countries and strengthen their health systems. And this message resonated so well that you could see in the month of February, as the previous speakers earlier said, Liberia had put in place, some mechanism, quarantine, travelers coming from high-risk countries. This was, a deja vu, learning from, what happened in the past, So we did not only provide, we're not only providing capacity building in terms of training, for epidemiologists, for lab technicians, but we also supply diagnostic kits, to our member states. For Liberia, we provided over 1,000 diagnostic kits. We provided drugs, chloroquine, erythromycin. We provided PPEs, we provided, viral transport medium. Now, moving from medical supplies, because it's good that we're looking at peace-building priorities. How do we mitigate socioeconomic impact of these, deadly virus? Because businesses have shut down, our revenue, has totally reduced, So this is the meeting that we're also holding in terms of now providing solidarity funds, for our member states, to be able to take care, of some of these emergencies. And we welcome, the president's, response package, that was submitted, to the parliament on Monday. And we're happy that the parliament is deliberating on it, that hopefully by tomorrow, we should be able to get the resolution out. Now, we're also looking at, strengthening peace, during this period. So we want to thank, Sweden. We want to thank for providing us with support for the ECOWAS radio. Now we're using the radio, for peace messages. Peace messages, and then we have developed jingles. We're now using drama. There's a company called Flomo Theater. It's reputed in Liberia, for over almost 30 years. They have reputations in producing jingles using drama. So we're bringing them to our studio, using practical tools, comedy, community outreach, social mobilization, dialogue with community leadership. So we want to thank CEDA, for this, gracious support. It's, and I'm happy that Hannah, we wanted to be an advocate, to CEDA and to the Swedish government, because they were also working very hard to see that this radio, it's expanded to all our member states, so that as Liberia is taking advantage of it, all the other members will also be able to take advantage of it. And I was also heard, we organized the meeting of our ministers of agriculture. I mean, you heard what the Minister of Finance said shortly, that food security, agriculture. So we had a virtual meeting with all the ministers of agriculture, and we asked them to submit their proposal on food security, during this period. So the plan now is to provide for them seeds, fertilizers, because borders are closed down. So how will they be able to get seeds? As you look at some of our member states, they import seeds from other member states. So we are working at the regional level, to strengthen food security, to also ensure that some of our member states that do not have a buffer, a national food basket buffer, we are assisting them to establish one. Then this package that the government is submitting, part of the ECOWAS plan through the National Center for Early Warning and Response, is also to develop a tracking. So our National Center for Early Warning, which ECOWAS created, we're developing tracking method, to be able to follow up this response, especially, ensuring that these palliatives, will get to the vulnerable people, will get to the elderly people, will get to the marginalized people, will get to the handicapped people, So it's a lot of resources that is required. And I really want to thank the Peacebuilding Commission, for your initiative, And we want to thank all the members, for supporting Liberia and, other members of our region. We really thank you, Anna, for hosting this virtual meeting. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Good to see you, and thank you so much for your remarks and the work you're doing regionally also. I look forward to meeting you in person, hopefully not too hope to meet you soon in reality as well. I now like to bring in Madam Bro, if she's available for some comments before I turn back to the speakers in New York. Madam Bro?
Yes, please. Okay. Again, I've listened to everybody. I've listened to the questions, and most of them have been answered, addressed by the Finance Minister, by the Minister of Internal Affairs, because we are all working within our pillars. But something that I would like to really chime in on, the Peacebuilding Fund, again, can be rest assured that with this restructuring and with all the pillars that have been done, I think one pillar is still in question, but it's going to be structured, and that pillar is the socioeconomic, the recovery response pillar. I think that will include Finance Ministry and Commerce. But I want to tell you, I want to be very, very clear with you that women are very much involved in this restructuring. We are working together on a daily basis. We are also thinking about the girls, the vulnerable girls, women, pregnant women. We are also working with the disaffected youth, youth at risk. They are all under the same umbrella. And we are making sure all the pillar heads include these people in their restructuring. Since I had it, every day I let them know that you need to work, and everything we do is community-based. I want to ensure that you are reassured that everybody will be under the umbrella and nobody will be left behind. So I'd like to promise you that. And with this, I want to be very grateful. The confidence that you are reposing in me, I will make sure that I deliver the best way I can. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, and we are confident in your work, Madam Bro, and thank you so much for bringing up an important aspect that leaving no one behind. Really, our support to your work, and look forward to keeping in touch with you for the future support as well. So I will now go. I just wanted to see if the resident coordinator, Mr. Amingo, do you want to come in again?
Oh, just one question that seemed not to have been answered was on the coordination, I suppose. And the question that was put on the humanitarian and recovery and development and nexus. I just wanted to say that we are working as a team within the place, as Madame Bro said, to make sure that both humanitarian recovery and development needs become coherently organized, so that one is not necessarily sacrificed for the other. When you're talking about community at large, depends on whichever stage each sector of the community will be in. Where there need to be a humanitarian intervention, it is strategic and intermittent targeted groups that are supported. Where people need to be supported to recover from some of the shocks, then of course recovery mechanisms are put in place to strengthen and their livelihoods. And in all this, we are preparing the communities for the medium and long-term development that will go on in their various communities. So generally, that is what is happening. We have coordination mechanisms that have been put in place and which will be strengthened as we go along. I think that is all I needed to say. I must also add this in terms of coordination. Somebody has a question about coordination. How are we able to pull all this together? I think one thing that has to be mentioned is that as the resident coordinator's office, the ambassadors and the donors as a whole, we have systematic and regular discussions. In fact, every Friday, there is a discussion between the NRCO's office and all the ambassadors, where we share information and discuss and improve also the chemistry between us. There is also the CPG, the Coordinating Partners Group, which devote themselves more into the details of programming that will help the government, that will define the support we give as development agencies to the government. So as a whole, we're working hand in hand, and we're working with the government on very, very close terms. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amaning, and thank you so much for the very good efforts that you're doing on the ground on coordination. That's of course key. I think now with these challenges, it's even more important to have good coordination in the field. And thank you so much for having so close and regular contacts also with the diplomatic community. I think we really need to work together in these difficult times. So thank you so much. I will now hand over to New York and ask Oscar Taranco, the Assistant Secretary General, if he would like to make some comments or add in anything. Thank you so much, Monrovia.
No, thank you very much, Anna Karin, and good morning to everybody. And first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I know it's been a fascinating meeting and we're running out of time, but just to thank the excellent presentations by the ministers, the national coordinators, our colleagues on the ground, the World Bank, the UN. I think this meeting actually shows the potential and the importance of the Peacebuilding Commission as an extremely important platform of solidarity, as an extremely important platform from learning as we are responding to this pandemic, and to focus not just on the immediate aspects, but as was rightly stated numerous times by many participants, on the medium to long term, particularly because how we preserve and how we build and on peace building successes will be extremely important. How the response is articulated will have a fundamental bearing on peace-building aspects. And we saw this in the last Ebola response. I think this Peacebuilding Commission was particularly involved in that in the past. And so again, the lessons learned from the last Peacebuilding Commission support activities. One of the critical lessons learned, and I think some of them have come out, the importance of coordination and strong immediate collaboration between the UN, the international financial institutions, the bilateral representations on the ground, and regional organizations, as well as the regional banks. I think today's briefing actually showed that kicking in much earlier, much faster, and with this common sense of purpose and focusing on the immediate, but also keeping an eye on the medium to long term. Important because deconflicting and avoiding duplication is precisely what the Peacebuilding Commission can help build on the very important coordination efforts on the ground. And then just very, very quickly, the fact that this response requires not just the whole of government, but the whole of society and the whole of partners in the response. Without forgetting that crucial will be how well and how fast we mobilize communities, particularly women and youth and community leaders, to complement the capacity and the lead role of the government in the response. And of course, communication. We learned that from the last Ebola response, communication, projecting the sense of national unity, of cohesion, of working across communities, focusing the response not just in the center, but also in the peripheries, and keeping the eye on the cross-border dynamics that are bound to come up. So the importance of inclusivity and the importance of social cohesion and building the trust and the legitimacy of institutions. Just to end, that we within the Peacebuilding Support Office, of course, are very happy to see these country configuration meetings getting off to the start, especially after last week's first virtual global meeting, which set the pace and set the stage with what this Peacebuilding Commission can offer, not just to the member states, but also how to build on its advisory role, both to the other intergovernmental bodies, And the Peacebuilding Fund, and we're working closely with Kingsley here, is readapting its existing program of $25 million precisely to see how we tackle that aspect of social economic impact on peacebuilding gains. So we are currently reworking and reprioritizing what is left of some of the ongoing projects, and have an open line with the resident coordinator and through him to the country team and everybody to see how the Peacebuilding Fund can come in to complement the humanitarian and socioeconomic mechanisms that are being put to play, how we keep a keen eye on conflict-sensitive programming. This is going to be hugely important for the recovery phase. Thank you, Anna Karen. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oscar, for these remarks. I agree with every word that you said, and we will continue to cooperate closely in bringing all these discussions forward in the very close future. Thank you so much, and thanks to you and your office for helping to arrange this meeting. That was, I think, a technical challenge from the beginning, but I think we succeeded pretty good in doing it, and I hope that we can continue as long as we work from home to have these meetings in different configurations as well. I'd like now, and it's my pleasure to give the floor to my very good friend and colleague, Ambassador Kimaya, to make some concluding remarks. Ambassador.
Hello, are you hearing me? Hello?
We hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me first congratulate you on your very first configuration meeting. It has been a very, very successful meeting, and my hat's off to you for that. Let me express immense thanks and appreciation to you, my colleague and friend, Ambassador Anna Karim, PR of Sweden to the UN, and chair of the UN Peacebuilding Commission, Liberia Configuration, for convening this very important meeting at this critical but appropriate time. I am very pleased that we collaborated with you, Ambassador Anna Karim, the UN Peacebuilding Support Office, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the UN country team in this endeavor. I also thank everyone who has contributed to organizing this meeting. I recognize and thank our honorable ministers, Finlay, Towe, and Salif, and Honorable Bro, and our RC, Dr. Amani, and other briefers for their insights and being spot on. I also recognize and thank our international colleagues at home in Liberia and in New York for their participation. Our hearts go out to all those who have succumbed to the deadly COVID-19 and those who have lost loved ones. We pray for speedy recovery of those who are sick of the virus and express immense gratitude to all those who are helping out, particularly our healthcare practitioners. We pray that they remain safe. We also pray that we all remain safe. The world is indeed going through perilous times, and COVID-19 has so far overwhelmed developed and developing countries, causing enormous fatalities, Liberia being no exception. The hard truth is that experts have indicated that the worst is yet to come. However, it is our fervent hope and prayer that this will not be the case. Liberia is grappling with a global COVID-19, like other affected nations, a pandemic that is causing debilitating socio-economic impact with multidimensional effects. This situation has an entry point for peace building, considering the need for support to communities and their participation and support as well, social cohesion, and security and justice services. These are areas, among others, where the Peacebuilding Commission and Peacebuilding Fund have provided support to Liberia prior to COVID-19 and are now more than critical to contain the virus in Liberia. To this end, we urge the Peacebuilding Fund through the Peacebuilding Commission to strongly consider reprogramming and augmenting its support to Liberia, considering the effects of COVID-19. As you have heard from the briefers, we are extremely concerned about the socio-economic and health-related impacts of COVID-19 and its related situation in Liberia. Such support from the Peacebuilding Commission and Peacebuilding Fund will ensure that gains made in Liberia are not reversed. Learning from the effects and previous experiences of the Ebola virus that plagued our nation, ruined our economy, and further wreaked havoc on our health sector, the need for our local, national, and international partners to give added impetus to the support base of our national response plan cannot be overly emphasized, so as to avoid the wide and uncontrollable spread of COVID-19 in Liberia. Liberia needs every support it can get now. Let me highlight the astute leadership role continuously being demonstrated by His Excellency Dr. George Manneh Weah, President of the Republic of Liberia, and his team in the fight against COVID-19, and for the timely measures instituted to protect the people and foreign residents of Liberia, and moreover, for his submission to the National Legislature of the state of emergency proposed measures. These timely and ongoing efforts on the part of His Excellency President Weah are noteworthy and commendable. We remain positive that the proposed measures, when fully implemented, will adequately address the devastating social and economic dimensions of COVID-19, as well as cater to the needs of the vulnerable groups in Liberia, including women, older persons, youth, low-wage workers, small and medium businesses, and the informal sector, just to name a few. The appointments of Honorable Mary Tayanobro and Ambassador Nora Finna-Bono as National Response Coordinator and National Compliance Manager, respectively, are in the right direction. We congratulate these two distinguished women for their preferments. On behalf of His Excellency President Weah and the government and people of Liberia, we extend appreciation to Dr. Kingsley Amani, UN Resident Coordinator in Liberia, and his UN team, and all of our local, national, and international partners who are either already lending and or will lend a helping hand to Liberia in this fight. We also commend the IMF for the immediate debt relief for 25 countries, including Liberia. To ensure a comprehensive defeat of COVID-19, we urge the UN Peacebuilding Commission and Peacebuilding Fund and the United Nations in general, and all the local, national, and international partners of Liberia, and all Liberians in general, at home and abroad, to support the state of emergency measures proposed by His Excellency President Weah to the National Legislature and the National Response Plan of the government of Liberia. To this end, we welcome and support the UN Secretary General's call for developed countries to immediately assist the less developed ones. Let me conclude by also expressing heartfelt thanks and appreciation on behalf of His Excellency President Weah and the government and people of Liberia to all the distinguished participants in this meeting and for all the meaningful comments, contributions, and thoughts shared, and most of all, for the overwhelming willingness and expression of support from you, our international friends, for our country, Liberia, during this critical period in the history of our nation. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I, before concluding this meeting, first say to you, Ambassador Kamaya, that I really appreciate our very intense cooperation during the last 48 hours, a lot of telephone calls back and forth, but I think it was a good preparation for this meeting. I also like to thank in New York, Peacebuilding Support Office, all colleagues and ambassadors and friends in New York, but also friends in Monrovia for your very substantial and good input and for the briefings and comments that we have received. I think it's been a very good meeting. Thank you so much. And can I also thank the ministers and Madame Bro present for their time devoted to this meeting, but also for the very good work that you are doing for the response to the COVID-19 in parallel to dealing with other challenges in the countries. My appreciation also to the UN resident coordinator, to the representatives of the of ECOWAS and the World Bank present in Monrovia. Thank you so much, and I do hope that to see you all at the physical meetings in the future. Can I also say that I think it has been proven, and many have been witnessing that there is a good cooperation and coordination in the field between the government, the UN, and the World Bank and other international partners, including the diplomatic community in Monrovia, and I think this is extremely important. I'd like to echo what Oscar Taranco also said about the importance of working with all national actors in Liberia, including civil society, women's organizations, and of course the affected communities throughout the country. We know and we have heard today how the COVID-19 is affecting an already strained economy. I think we had a very good briefing from the Minister of Finance on that, but also affecting a fragile socioeconomic community and society in Liberia. We are seeing that many of the root causes of the conflict remains to be addressed, including national reconciliation, which was mentioned also today, the continued work towards inclusion of women, addressing issues related to youth unemployment, land rights, and decentralizations. These are among some of the questions that need to be addressed. I have heard today the importance of fighting Corona at the same time as continuing to build peace in Liberia. I think this is a strong message that we bring with us. The importance of a coordinated international community and continued good cooperation between the actors in the Liberian government and the international community. The whole of the government response, and of course the importance of meeting the immediate acute crisis, but also working with the long-term, medium and long-term socioeconomic challenges. The importance of recovery and building resilience. This configuration has a mandate to bring together relevant actors to marshal support and to help improve the coordination between these actors in support of the peace building in Liberia. As the chair of the configuration, I will continue to work for a strong and continued strong partnership between the UN actors, international financial institutions, and member states. And I will, following this meeting, get in touch with all relevant partners to discuss how we can follow up this very important meeting. And I will get back to you in the near future. In the meantime, it was very, very good to see you all. I miss everyone, especially my colleagues here in New York, and I wish you to stay healthy, stay safe, and I will see you soon. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.